Hey y'all, we're Brandon and Megan Giggling, and we give real talk and real solutions to help you get from where you are to where you want to be.
Whether you are on step one or years into your own personal growth journey, we've got the tools you need to level up.
So if you want to stop making excuses, start taking action, and grow into the person you are meant to be, then pop in your headphones and let's do this.
You ready?
This is the Fools in Love podcast. Hey, what's up, y'all? Welcome back. It's another week on the Fools in Love podcast. I hope you're doing well. I hope this week finds you doing extremely well. And Meg, how are you doing today?
I'm so good. Ready to knock this podcast episode right out of here.
Oh, man. I love the enthusiasm and motivation. One of the things we're going to talk about today is something we've really been talking about for a long time, certainly since this whole pandemic. Oh, gosh, I don't even want to say the word. It's like one of those hot words. But since it came upon us, this pandemic and all of these issues, I've really noticed as time's gone on that there's a lot of negativity, there's a lot of hate, there's a lot of separation in the world. It's really easy to fall into the pattern where you just kind of adapt to your surroundings, right? So with anything, I mean, you are the people you surround yourself with. You are what you allow into your life. And so one of the things we noticed for us personally and with the people around us is the negativity, kind of the lack of patience with people. All of those things have been coming to a head lately. And I feel like looking at it in a different lens would be helpful. And I wonder for the people out there if they're finding themselves in this same place where your patience is growing thin. You know, the lines at restaurants, the wait at restaurants longer, traveling's becoming more of a bear. People are just cutting you off more. They're being more impatient. It seems like overall as a culture, we're just separated now more than ever. And like I said, I feel like, I don't know for you, but for me, it just feels like it's really easy to lean into that and say, well, people are the worst, or, you know, I don't want to do this. You know, I'm so sick of this or that, and really kind of leaning into not so much the hate, but just the negativity and not being sensitive to what people are all of us really are dealing with.
Right. So we've really been noticing this for a long time, especially like in a customer service type way, where because of what we do during our day job and the fact that it's very highly customer relation oriented. And then also because we are consumers in this world, obviously, and we do go out to stores and we do go out to dinners and all the things, we've noticed it kind of both ways where we find that, you know, our customers are becoming more impatient, more irate, and not just with us. I think it's just that that's something that they're dealing with. And so it kind of bleeds over into us. It's not that we as a company did anything wrong. It's not that we're going out and mistreating people that are at the restaurants we're trying to go to. It's just that people in general are just kind of fed up with everything, and it just bleeds out into how they're treating others. And for us, we've really been trying to make a difference in our small little corner of the world by just understanding that people are going through it and trying to not get sucked into that attitude of, well, you know, this person is really being mean to me. This person really hasn't done the right thing here, and kind of retaliating almost. And instead just leaning into the love and leaning into tipping anyway when you had a crap experience and those kind of things, because it's hard out there and we understand that, but it's just so easy to be like, man, it sucks. And I'm just going to be miserable and mean and hateful too.
Right. And I think the realization that I think we've both had throughout this experience of just kind of being more aware of it, because I like with anything else, I mean, you have to be aware. But I think as you become more aware, what I've come to realize is you can't fight hate with hate. You can't fight negativity with more negativity, because we can all get annoyed. And trust me, I've been annoyed with the situation we're all currently living in, whether it's any of the things we mentioned or not, or something completely different for you. I've been really irritated with it, and I've found myself grumpy, mad, upset, depressed, angry, anxious, whatever adjective you want to use, But what I realized is if I go out then into the world, if I'm talking to any of y'all, if I'm talking to someone at the store, if I'm interacting with my employees, if I'm talking with my kids, and I'm bringing that same energy and that same attitude toward everything that I'm doing, I'm not really helping to fix a problem. I'm just perpetuating the problem. Now, you might be out there and say, well, Brandon, you can't fix it. Like this problem can't be fixed by just one person. Like me being nicer to people isn't going to help. Now, I'm going to argue in a minute that that's incorrect, but also just try it and see the effect that it has. But I'm going to give you an example because we've had a number of occasions since we've been more aware where we've been put in situations that weren't amenable to happiness and joy. They were very easy to fall into a negative space, but rather than doing that, we spun it into a more positive way just by some simple actions we took. And you might want to try these on your end. But one of the things we've done in the last several months is we've had the chance to travel on an airplane multiple times. Any of you know that before a pandemic, it was a very stressful environment. You kind of feel like, I always say you're like a cattle, like being herded like cattle when you're doing it. At least that's how I explained it to Meg and my kids. Like, well, we have to go through the security line, and then we have to go through this, and then we have to give them a ticket. And it's all these things where you're kind of almost being herded like cattle. Throughout that experience and understanding that the reality is we do have an employment shortage. We do have people that are kind of on edge. We are working in an environment that's very difficult. We know that for us personally, but a lot of times, like Meg said, as the consumer, we cannot carry that same attitude over. Like, man, I wish these customers would just be a little bit more sensitive to our situation. And instead, when we get out and we're the consumer role, we don't tend to do that. So I was very conscious the whole time we were traveling. I was very thankful. I was very gracious to all the people we came in contact with that worked at the airline or worked at the TSA or worked at a restaurant in the airport or while we were traveling, understanding that it is taking a little bit longer on this wait and the food is taking a little bit longer. But being gracious with the people in the front lines that are working and really just being conscious of the attitude that I was showing up with. And then in turn, our interactions throughout the whole process were positive. Now, if I would have gone into all of those situations angry and upset and irritated, what do you think would have happened with the person on the other side that I'm interacting with? I think it's easy to get irritated without looking at the other person and realizing they are another person. They're a person who wants to be seen, loved, and heard. That's what all people around want. And in this situation, in this environment we're living in, it's no different. It's just harder. It seems like it's harder to come by. So how can you be a light to the world and spread some more of that love rather than spreading this hateful nature that seems to be overtaking everything?
Yeah. And one thing that you said was that it's kind of hard to think that you can make a difference because you can't really change anything. But I would argue that it doesn't matter if you can't change the whole everybody, because really what you're trying to do in all of these situations is change the reality of one person, to change a moment for one person. You can't make the whole wide world be nicer and you can't make the whole wide world be patient, but you know what you can do? You can say thank you. You can tip anyway, even though the service was rough, because you can see that they have way too many tables and there's like one person and the cook is now the host and, the waiter is waiting all the tables and all those things. Like you can see that. And for me, it's just been a realization of like understanding that in all of these scenarios, people are just doing the best that they possibly can. And like, we have to work with that. Like we have to understand that. And while we may not be able to change the greater scheme of things, I would argue that you've definitely changed somebody's day when you show just a little bit of patience, understanding, and grace.
Right. And again, I mean, what do you want the world that you interact with to be like? With anything, if you want the world to be a more joyful place, then how are you not going to go out and then try to spread joy yourself? How are you not going to make a difference? Like you said, at our office, it has been hard. People have been more stressed. It has been more difficult. And we've taken steps as an employer to make sure that we're doing what we can. Now, these aren't going to make some huge difference to our staff, but they do make a slight difference. We'll buy cookies for them. We'll buy a random Starbucks for them. We'll buy breakfast. We'll do small things to mix up the day so it's not the normal same monotony. And now you could argue that again, any of those things is not going to really change the whole scheme of the environment that we live in and that they're having to work on and that next phone call they're going to get or anything along the spectrum that's going to happen. But think about for your life. If one of those things happened, would it make a difference for you? If you interacted with someone who was more kind, who was complimentary, who said you looked nice, who said it was great to meet you, who held the door for you, who let you in traffic, who did any of those things, who randomly bought a coffee for you if they were behind you, you bought a coffee for them or whatever. Like, would that make a difference for you? And maybe you need to sit with that a little bit. I know I do. I'm not being accusatory here. I'm saying for me, I need to hear this. When I sit with it, I'm like, well, of course. I mean, obviously I'd love someone to buy me coffee or breakfast. I'd love someone to compliment me. I'd love someone to smile at me. It's the little things that make a difference, but it's very hard and very easy, I should say, to get pulled into a whole different thought pattern. Because we can say this and we can have this. I mean, you could speak to this too, Meg, but to be honest, I mean, we can have this conversation. You can listen to this podcast. You can feel really great about it, and you're going to go out and be the happiest person that anyone's going to interact with today. And then you get out your front door and you start interacting with other people. And it's hard and it's challenging. But I truly believe that this world is built on love. You're built to spread love. So the question you have to ask yourself is that how you're showing up right now?
And I'm glad you brought that up too, B, because what I find is like, I'm super, super good at like starting the day out positive. Like most of the time I feel like I walk in with a purpose, with a mission, with a pretty good outlook. And then, man, something happens and I'm like, you know what? Why even bother? Why should I even be nice? Who even cares? Does anyone even notice that I'm being nice? Like, does it matter one bit to anyone, or should I just be miserable because I don't really like the way they just did that, and I don't really like the way that person just treated me, and I don't like, and I didn't, and you can go on forever. And that does happen. Like, there are days when I'm like, why do I even try? I'm trying to be so positive, and then guess what? Like Brandon was saying, that next phone call or that next interaction, whatever, just totally brings you down. So one thing I've really tried to remember is putting myself in the other person's shoes. And of course, there are people that are just jerks. There are always going to be people that are just jerks. It doesn't matter. That's just who they are. I say just who they are. They could change, but they don't want to change. You know what I mean? And they're just going to be mean. But for the most part, I'm betting that right now, especially in today's day and age, that a lot of people aren't actually deep down jerks. They're just having a bit of a moment. They're just having a hard time. Something is not really easy for them right now. And so maybe you did catch them in that 14 seconds of really bad behavior, or maybe you did happen to say the wrong thing to them just in that 5-minute interaction. And we just have to really be careful to just put each other in each other's shoes a lot of the time so that you don't get into these situations where you're like, ugh, I'm so annoyed because I'm betting you that there's a reason, not that it excuses it, but I'm betting that there's a reason that they had that reaction to what you did or what you said.
Right. And one of the things you said, I'm going to throw right back to you. Why? Why do you show up that way? You said you try to start every day with a positive attitude and you try to show up that way. And then when you interact with someone and it doesn't go well, or there's a negative thing that happens or whatever, you name it, and you ask the question, why? Why do I show up that way? So why do you? Why should we? Why should a listener out there do it? Why do you try to do it? What's the motivation?
Yeah, there's a few things. I think number one, it's because that's how you should act. Just because somebody is mean to you or hurts your feelings doesn't mean you should be miserable to the next 27 people you encounter. Number two, I feel better. Like, I don't want to be in misery. If I let something that happens at 9 a.m. hold me down for the whole day, I'm just going to spend a whole day in misery when I could let that go by 9:10 and move on with my day and be fine and start back over. So it's for other people, and it's also very much for myself that I don't want to do that.
Right, because you ultimately get to control it, right? You get to control how you show up. You get to control what you surround yourself with, and you get to control how you interact with the 27 people you interact with after you had that bad experience. So all of these things, you actually have the control of how you're going to show up. You have control of how you're going to interact. And ultimately, you want the environment that you surround yourself with to be more positive and more joyful. And I would also argue you want to spread love to other people, whether they take it or not. Like, you have no control of how they take it. And they might not take it the way you want. But then for us to be angry about that is a little bit crazy, because why were you really doing it in the first place? You weren't really doing it to make yourself feel better, although surrounding yourself with more joy could make you feel better. You're trying to, in what we're talking about here, go out and spread joy or happiness into an environment that otherwise isn't, to help try to make someone else's day a little bit easier. Because like you said, no matter how negative they are, you don't really know what anyone's dealing with. Right. And we all know we're dealing with struggles no matter what it is. And most of us aren't able to articulate those struggles. And a lot of times we'll go in a place of really dark space where we think treating other people in that way somehow justifies the way we're feeling. And our friend Chance Shelton says it best, like, hurt people hurt people. And so if someone's out there being negative, that means they're hurting. So like Megan said earlier, being more sensitive to that rather than being negative,
dishing it back.
Right, can make a difference. Like, I don't know why we decide to do that to everyone, and why we think fighting hate with hate and fighting separation with separation is somehow going to bring us all closer together. I think the biggest obstacle we all face is we're so separated as a society. And whenever it comes to a place where you want to have a conversation or bring some joy or anything else, there are going to be haters, like Meg said, and we let those haters somehow control the narrative of our own life. But they don't really have that control unless we give it to them. So we can go out there and make a difference today, spread more love, because we decided we want to. Mm-hmm. And no one else gets to control that unless we allow them to do it.
Right. So one of the things that I've been doing, I don't know, maybe 6 months or so, is, and this does not come naturally to me, by the way. I don't really talk to people I don't know. I don't really initiate conversations out in the public. But one thing I have been trying to be really conscious of, and I'm doing a pretty good job, is anytime I notice something about somebody, I compliment them. So I'll be, taking the mail out or whatever, and I'll see somebody in the hallway at work, and like, I really like their pants. I'm like, oh my gosh, your pants are so cute. I'm like, oh, thanks. Or I drop the kids off at daycare or school or whatever, and one of the teachers has on the best shoes, or, their hair looks nice or whatever. And I'm like, oh, your hair looks great. Your shoes are awesome. Whatever that compliment is, because I know that no matter what you're doing, whether you're working in an office, working in a childcare facility, working at a school, whatever your day brings to you, like, there's going to be a hard part of your day probably. And why not just start that off on a good foot, or help end their day on a good foot? Like, every day when I pick up our son from daycare, if I get to see the teachers, because sometimes he's already moved on to a different room because I'm a little bit later. But if I see his regular teachers, I'm like trying to talk to them and say, oh, how was Maverick's day? Thank you so much. Like, just really thanking them and appreciating them for what they do, because I know that sitting in a room of 4-year-olds all day is probably really, really freaking hard, and most of us can't do it. So I'm going to make sure that they know that I am so thankful for them taking care of our boy all day, because it's a hard job for sure.
Right. And again, coming full circle, we're built for love. We're built to be spreading love. So the reason it feels so bad when we're in a space or environment where that's not the norm is because that's not who we're built to be. We're built to be spreading love, not to be spreading hate. And as long as we fight against the urge and somehow think that's going to fulfill us or make us feel better by one-upping the next person or treating the next person bad because we were treated bad, and why should we have to do that for them? The more we continue that cycle, the worse we're going to feel in our own hearts. And that, I hope, hits you deep. And I hope you're able to sit with that this week, because it's something that I've really been reflecting on, and something that's been heavy on both of our hearts. And to be honest, we've talked about doing this episode for a while now. And it's because it's so heavy, and it's because we know some of you are going to turn it off. And it's because we know that some people out there are not going to feel good about it. But sometimes there's things that you need to hear that we all need to hear. And if I feel like I'm being probed in my own heart, then I'm going to share it with y'all.
We hope you guys have a great week. We love you.
Thank you all so much for listening.
Make sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode.
And if you want to be our BFFs, leave us a review. It helps more people find the show and allows us to share our message with the world.
We love y'all.